Good morning. This is the morning from the New York Times, your daily briefing for Thursday, August 20th, 2026. I'm Sam Sifton. We've got a packed edition today. America's gross national debt has topped $40 trillion for the first time. Prince Harry and Meghan are moving back to Britain after 6 years in the United States, and we're leading with a striking new study on cannabis use in America that my colleague Jody Ruderin has been digging into. Let's start there. Jody Ruderin, our editorial director for newsletters, writes today that she never takes drugs at work. But for the last few years, she's been trying to develop what she calls a casual weed habit. Like many of her over 50 friends, she found that even a single cocktail or glass of wine with dinner gave her a headache the next morning, and she preferred not to drink her calories. With marijuana now legal for recreational use in half the country, she thought, why not experiment? She started with a vape but kept forgetting to use it. Then last summer she dabbled in THC seltzer, refreshing, low-cal, a nice little buzz. A couple of months ago, after a detailed consult at a dispensary, she walked away with a tincture for her arthritic feet, some gummies for play, and other gummies for sleep. Those work, she says, and don't leave her groggy when she gets up at 5 to go to the gym. So it was distressing, Jody writes, to learn yesterday that a growing number of Americans are developing cannabis use disorders, healthcare speak for addiction or abuse. A national study found that 9% of American men and nearly 6% of women reported symptoms of the disorder in 2024, up from about 7% of men and 5% of women in 2021. Some people with the disorder can't quit. Others can't even cut back. And some keep using the drug despite it hurting their relationships. The main reason for the spike, experts say, is that a lot of weed now contains much higher doses of THC. Dr. Nora Fokow, director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the paper's senior author, put it bluntly, the notion that cannabis is not addictive may basically be incorrect. The higher the content of the drug, the higher the risk for addiction. The numbers are striking. In 2024, 26% of men in the United States reported using cannabis, up from 22% in 2021. Among women, it was 21%, up from 18%. Usage is highest among those ages 21 to 34, 37% of those men and nearly 34% of those women report using marijuana in 2024. That still pales in comparison to alcohol. More than half of Americans drink at least occasionally. But here's what's alarming, the rate of problematic use is higher than with alcohol. Of those who said they use cannabis, about 30% showed symptoms of the disorder. Among drinkers, it's less than 20%. Alcohol abuse is still a larger problem overall, affecting nearly 13% of men and 8% of women. Jody's demographic, women over 50, showed the biggest spike in cannabis use over the 3 years of the study. It jumped 40% between 2021 and 2024. They're still the lowest consumers of cannabis, about 13% reported using the drug, while just under 60% said they drink alcohol. Jody talked to Lori Leibovic, who runs our Well Desk, about what this all means. The jump in use is no surprise, Lori said, given that cannabis has become legal in more places at the exact same time that scientists are finding more and more connections between drinking and deadly diseases like cancer. Some groups say there's no safe amount of alcohol. Weed has also been linked to increased risk of stroke or heart attack, as well as memory loss, though studies also suggest it can reduce pain. Lori pointed out that a lot of menopausal women are reaching for gummies to relieve stress or help with sleep. They're in that sandwich generation moment, caring for aging parents and cranky teenagers alongside careers and fitness regimens, and they can't waste even an hour in the morning recovering from a hangover. The problem, Lori noted, is that we've grown up believing marijuana is not addictive because it's natural. That may have been true back at Woodstock, but the weed people are smoking or swallowing now is up to 15 times stronger. And while there are a lot of rehab programs for alcohol addiction, resources for cannabis crises are scarce. Jody concludes, addiction, memory loss, stroke. Maybe it's okay that she keeps forgetting to use that vape. Now to politics. Jennifer Hegseth, the wife of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, has taken an unusually active role at the Pentagon, advising on communications and attending meetings with foreign officials. Our correspondent Elizabeth Buehmiller reports there's never been a Pentagon spouse quite like her. After an 18-year career at Fox News, Jennifer Hegseth is now her husband's most influential advisor and de facto producer, shaping the job as no Pentagon spouse has before. In May, she was in camouflage shorts and a sweat-drenched t-shirt that said "This is war," working out with sailors, Marines, and her husband on the deck of the USS Boxer in Singapore. In June, she and 6 of the couple's 7 children accompanied Secretary Hegseth to the D-Day commemoration in Normandy, where a Defense Department promotional video with a swelling, cinematic soundtrack captured husband and wife walking arm in arm along the beach. She sits in on meetings with foreign defense ministers, reviews speech drafts, and has a direct line to the White House. Current and former officials describe her influence as extraordinary. One called it bonkers that a spouse has this kind of access and sway over policy and messaging. Meanwhile, in deep red Wyoming, Republicans rejected hard-right candidates in this week's primaries, including a candidate for governor backed by President Trump. Our reporter David Chen writes that the ultra-conservatives in Wyoming's Freedom Caucus entered Tuesday's Republican primaries with visions of a clean sweep of state government, from the governor's office to the state Senate and House. Instead, the pendulum swung the other way, hard. Republican voters rejected Freedom Caucus candidates who ran for governor, secretary of state, and school superintendent, siding with more mainstream conservative Republicans. In the primary to succeed outgoing Governor Mark Gordon, State Senator Eric Barlow, a rancher and veteran lawmaker, defeated the Freedom Caucus-backed candidate. The results suggest a limit to the hard right's appeal even in one of the most conservative states in the country. This fits a broader pattern. A series of losses by Trump-endorsed candidates has raised questions about the president's control over the party. Jess Bidgood reports that this spring, President Trump easily dispensed with Republicans who had crossed him in a display of raw power that seemed to underscore his iron grip on the party's base. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, and Senator John Cornyn of Texas all fell to challengers backed by Mr. Trump. But the spring of retribution has given way to a more complicated summer. A series of losses by Trump-endorsed candidates has eroded his winning record, raising fresh questions about whether a president approaching lame duck status can still exert as much control as he wants over his party's voters. Now the economy. America's gross national debt topped $40 trillion for the first time on Wednesday, an ominous milestone for an economy that sits on a shaky fiscal foundation after decades of borrowing to pay for the rising costs of the military, social safety net programs, and President Trump's tax cuts. Alan Rapport reports from Washington that this year alone, the United States is on track to borrow more than $2 trillion to help pay for its obligations, including spending on the war in Iran and the sweeping tax cuts that Republicans enacted in 2025. Soaring interest payments to investors are consuming a growing share of the federal budget. President Trump's promises to restore fiscal order and reduce the amount of America's debt burden have been undercut by spending on the Iran war, tax cuts, and tariff refunds. The Treasury Department calmed a jittery bond market yesterday by doubling the amount of its own debt that it can buy back from investors. Joe Renison reports the move helped push bond prices up and yields down. The action came one day after the yield on the 30-year Treasury bond reached a nearly 2-decade high, a troubling signal driven by mounting concerns over rising deficits, rampant borrowing by artificial intelligence companies, and stubborn inflation. The Treasury market is the largest bond market in the world, and yields on the government's debt are used across the world as a benchmark for everything from mortgages to corporate loans. Also on the economic front, changes to student loan repayment rules will force some borrowers to pay more, and for a longer term. Tara Siegel Bernard writes that as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed last summer, Congress rewrote the rules for certain student loans. Imagine your bank changed the terms of a loan you'd been paying down for more than a decade, increasing your payment and extending the term by 5 years. Any commercial bank would most likely be accused of violating basic contract law. But legislators are permitted to make changes, so borrowers' legal rights aren't clear-cut, though to many of them, it still feels a lot like a broken contract. Turning to health. An experimental mRNA vaccine prevented the return and spread of skin cancer in high-risk patients, the pharmaceutical companies Moderna and Merck announced yesterday. Carolyn Johnson reports the vaccine allowed people with high-risk melanoma to live longer, cancer-free. For decades, cancer vaccines have been one of the most tantalizing ideas in cancer treatment, offering the hope of harnessing a person's own immune system to attack tumors. Dr. Elias Sayar, a pediatric oncologist at the University of Florida who was not involved in the trial, called it a big deal, saying the results could help usher a whole new wave of new therapeutic treatments for cancer. The mRNA technology that was instrumental in COVID vaccines is being repurposed here to train the immune system to recognize and destroy cancer cells. President Trump nominated Dr. Heidi Overton, a White House aide and proponent of the Make America Healthy Again agenda, to serve as the next FDA commissioner. Christina Jewett reports Dr. Overton is a fierce opponent of abortion rights and a supporter of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s MAHA agenda. In a post on Truth Social, Trump called Dr. Overton a rock star in my administration and said he needed her leadership at the FDA to ensure that the U.S. remains the world leader for scientific discovery and cures. The agency has had significant staff turnover and political interference in recent months. A former advisor to Dr. Anthony Fauci pleaded guilty yesterday to conspiring to hide records related to the origins of the coronavirus. Benjamin Mueller reports Dr. David Morans, a former NIH official, admitted to attempts to conceal emails that discuss the origins of the pandemic. The plea comes as Dr. Fauci faces mounting pressure from Republican lawmakers over accusations that he sought to cover up knowledge that COVID had leaked from a lab in China. Dr. Fauci told a House panel in 2024 that Dr. Morans' conduct was wrong and inappropriate and that he was not aware of it at the time. And the DEA has joined the investigation into the death of actress Hayden Panettiere, who died of an apparent drug overdose on Sunday in South Carolina at age 36. Alan Feuer, Derek Bryson Taylor, and Matt Stevens report that Panettiere had frequently discussed her struggles with drugs, alcohol, and debilitating chronic pain. In the months preceding her death, she shared more than ever in a memoir titled This Is Me, A Reckoning, and in several interviews. Local police have said there is no evidence of foul play. Now to a story that's playing out in communities across the country. Voters are using recall campaigns to oust local officials who approved massive data centers. David McCabe reports from Independence, Missouri, where at a city council meeting in June, a councilman named John Perkins stared down a crowd intent on throwing him out of office. The room was packed with dozens of people, some forced to stand in the back. Many had helped gather more than 1,200 signatures to recall Perkins over a data center under construction on the outskirts of town. They were furious that Perkins, along with 4 other council members, had voted in March to award billions of dollars in tax breaks to a $150 billion data center project. Loudoun County in Virginia hosts more than 250 data centers and is known as the data center capital of the world. Our technology correspondent Cecilia Kahn describes how the AI boom is affecting the county. The backlash is growing. More local officials are facing recall elections for their support of these computing sites. In the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates said it is cutting off all trade and financial transactions with Iran, adding further economic pressure on the Islamic Republic as the Trump administration pushes to isolate it. Ismail Nar and Vivian Narin report the decision was announced soon after the Emirati government accused Iran of launching missiles toward its territory. The Emirates has long been a major trading hub for Iran, and analysts say it has been key to Iranian efforts to evade international sanctions, which Emirati officials deny. With Iran making ship traffic perilous, the U.S. Navy has been running a stealth operation to guide oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Peter Eves and John Ismay report that only a few oil tankers braved Iran's attacks to go through the strait for much of the war, leading to a drastic reduction in how much crude reached world markets. But since May, the U.S. military has played a crucial role in getting millions of barrels of oil through the strait, helping to keep oil prices from rising further. The operation stealthily shepherds tankers through the southern part of the strait on routes close to Omani waters, using surveillance aircraft and warships to monitor Iranian movements. The Israeli military said yesterday it would open criminal investigations into the killing of Palestinians by troops in 2 high-profile cases during the Gaza war, including the deaths of Hind Rajab, a 5-year-old girl, and more than a dozen medical workers. Isabel Kirshner reports from Jerusalem that the decision to transfer the cases for criminal investigations followed a lengthy review into dozens of contentious incidents during the war by a military fact-finding mission. The reviews came after widespread international condemnation of Israel's conduct. Such investigations have rarely led to convictions. And Iran and the United States have settled into an uneasy, in-between state that risks either a return to fighting or a hardening stalemate. Yegana Torbati writes from Istanbul that they are not seriously negotiating, nor are they shooting at each other. At the core of this unresolved status are calculations, perhaps miscalculations, by each side. Iranian officials believe they have more to gain from withstanding U.S. economic pressure and maintaining control over the Strait of Hormuz than from making major concessions. U.S. officials think maximum pressure will eventually force Iran to choose between its nuclear program and its economy. Both sides may be wrong. Around the world, Prince Harry, his wife Meghan, and their children are moving back to Britain in the upcoming weeks, according to 2 people familiar with their decision. Michael Shear reports from London that the move comes 6 years after they left for the United States amid a clash with other members of the royal family. The surprise decision ends a self-imposed exile for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex that began amid anger and recriminations that brought international attention to warring factions inside Buckingham Palace. Prince Harry was stripped of his honorary military titles and royal patronages. The couple will remain non-working royals. It's unclear where they will live or what they will do. Efrat Livni provides a timeline. They began dating about a decade ago, married in 2018, have 2 children, Prince Archie born in London in May 2019, and Princess Lilibet born in California in June 2021. They struggled with the attention and pressure in Britain, stepped back as senior royals in 2020, and moved to California. Now they're returning. Russia stepped up its air campaign, taking advantage of Ukraine's lack of defensive missiles. Overnight strikes on Kyiv killed at least 13 people. And the sister of North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, dismissed Trump's decision to scale back major military exercises with South Korea, saying the reduced exercises were still provocative and aggressive. Kim Yo-jong, a powerful advisor, said she was unaware of any communication with Washington, contradicting President Trump's claim her brother had responded to his outreach. If the U.S. calculates that it can propagate its recent measure as one of so-called good faith, they will not get the desired answer, she said in a statement carried by state media. In our opinion section today, the editorial board argues that Trump's election meddling is eroding American democracy. They've analyzed 12 benchmarks, like declaring false emergencies, to keep an eye on. An essayist Will McGrath road-tripped with his family this summer to visit cemeteries throughout the Midwest. He writes that it's a special way to recognize your own ephemerality. In June, his family hiked out to a pioneer cemetery near Duluth, Minnesota, along the cascading St. Louis River. His 9-year-old asked, "Why are we here again?" She has auburn hair chopped at the jawline and believes fervently in magic. His 14- and 16-year-old sighed and cast their gaze skyward. He's been haunting the graveyards of the upper Midwest like the high school goth kid he never was. It's not about morbidity, he says, it's about perspective. In Morning Reads, One Times obituaries writer is skeptical of famous last words but admits some are too good to be disregarded. Take playwright Eugene O'Neill's "I Knew It. I knew it. Born in a hotel room and goddammit dying in a hotel room." A German grandpa who complains about matcha has become a social media sensation among young Germans. Werner Kalasinski, 89, went from heartbroken widower to partying on a yacht. The most clicked link in the morning yesterday was about presidential aide Natalie Harp. She never takes a day off, not even Sunday, works out of the Oval Office, has a regular seat on Marine One, texts with world leaders on the president's behalf, stays up late drafting social media posts. She's the utmost gatekeeper to President Trump, a one-woman conduit of information operating entirely outside the usual chain of command. And Derek Parker, known as New York's hip-hop cop, died at 65. A veteran detective with deep connections in the city's rap scene, he served as a one-man intelligence unit and liaison to the music world, working crimes involving entertainers like Sean Combs, Jennifer Lopez, and Lil' Kim. Today's number, 29. That's the percentage of all new cars sold around the world this year that are expected to be powered by electricity. It's a sharp rise from just 4% in 2020. In sports, a judge granted a temporary restraining order that could allow Tampa Bay Buccaneers rookie Jack Pyburn and other NFL players to return to college play this season. Pyburn recorded 2 sacks in a preseason win over the New York Jets on Friday. Louisiana's 19th Judicial District Court granted the order Wednesday that could allow more than 30 college athletes a 5th year of eligibility, the latest in a string of lawsuits against the NCAA related to its recent age-based eligibility rule change. And in Tennessee, a driver crashed into Milligan University's cycling team training on a mountain highway, killing 2 riders and injuring 7 others. Sophomores Braden Rogers and Halon Engdahl were killed. The driver was charged with vehicular homicide. Recipe of the day: Portobello patty melts. I thought it might be possible to come up with a recipe for a vegetarian patty melt that was pretty good, writes the author. I never thought I'd prefer it to the Los Angeles original. Make sure you get a nice crisp, buttery crust on the rye bread at the end to contrast with the melted Swiss, soft caramelized onions, and beefy mushroom meatiness. And in culture, Alabama Shakes was one of the breakout rock bands of the 2010s Grammy Winners Festival mainstays. Then the band went on hiatus for an extended stretch, and frontwoman Brittany Howard pursued a solo career. Now the band returns with its first album in more than a decade, I Must Be Dreaming, out this month. John Perels, who has covered pop music at the Times for 4 decades, talked with the trio about their return and the difficulties of writing excellent songs. If I'm ever reincarnated, I do not want to be a writer ever again, Howard told him. I want to become a mathematician or something stuck and true. 1 + 1 = 2. Something uncreative. Maybe a mechanic. Helen Shaw, our theatre critic, has been soaking up the delicious chaos of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, taking in close to 24 shows out of roughly 4,000 and reveling in the power of artists watching other artists work. There's something ridiculous about the name, she writes. Fringe implies decoration on a margin, but if you've ever elbowed your way down a crammed Edinburgh sidewalk in August past hundreds of posters for stand-up shows and circus spectaculars, accepting promotional flyers from a woman wearing a disco ball on her head, you might wonder what garment could possibly be larger than this. In June, a Russian drone struck the Dormition Cathedral at the center of Kiev's oldest monastery, causing a massive blaze. Volunteers, mostly parishioners, military veterans, and charity workers, have since worked alongside Orthodox priests to clean it up, and the results are stunning. There was a bustle on a recent morning on the quiet grounds as volunteers gathered beside Orthodox priests with hose and rakes to assist in a grand cleanup for an anniversary celebration. And late-night hosts joked about Trump's efforts to rekindle his bromance with Kim Jong-un. Man, you know you're depressed when you're texting an old hookup from 7 years ago, Jimmy Fallon said. The Morning recommends, sleep better at home, make your bedroom more like a hotel room with advice from the blacked-out somnologists at Wirecutter. And plan for retirement long before you retire, in part to protect against cognitive decline. Ross Andel, a professor at Arizona State University who studies cognitive aging, says before retiring you're getting up in the morning, socializing with coworkers, dealing with mental challenges. All of a sudden, after 50 years, you lose that routine. There's this idea that the body and brain adapt when they're no longer needed, he says. That's when you see the deterioration. Games today, spelling bee. Yesterday's pangram was provolone. And mini crossword, Wordle, connections, crossplay, and strands. Thanks for spending part of your morning with the Times and me. If you're not currently a subscriber, would you consider becoming one today? Subscriptions support our work and allow it to continue. Appreciate it. See you tomorrow. Sam.